Hi, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me on today's program. On today's program, we're in session number 2 of our new series entitled The New Era Qualified Medical Evaluator. And I have a fascinating program for you today. A program that I'm certain if you will adopt just 2 of the procedures that I want to share with you in today's program, just 2. If you'll just commit to adopting 2 of the several procedures I'm going to share with you today, it will certainly change your future as a qualified medical evaluator. And the new era and our new future as a qualified medical evaluator is now upon us. It's upon us right now as we begin the new year of 2020. Recent changes in the medical legal system, and specifically recent changes being imposed upon the Division of Workers' Compensation from outside forces, are going to, in my opinion, dramatically change the QME landscape, not only in this year, 2020, but also for many years into the future. And I'll share with you some of those changes, and I'll share with you the reasons why I anticipate there to be dramatic changes in the work that we as qualified medical evaluators are doing and will do over the next 5 years. Now, in session number 1 of this program, I talked about the great opportunity that awaits us as qualified medical evaluators if, and that's a great qualification, if we can adapt and adopt ourselves to the new changing landscape that's coming. And it's coming in the very near future. And when I say the very near future, I'm talking about over the next 90 to 120 days. And to introduce the great opportunity and to introduce the great changes that are coming, I shared with you in our last session 3 references that discuss and portend these coming changes to our system. I shared with you the recent state auditor's report from November 2019 that was just released just a couple of weeks ago as of the time of this recording. I shared with you an earlier report from the California Workers' Compensation Institute dated February 2018, and I also shared with you some findings from a Cheeswick report dated October 2017. So here are these reports. This is the 2020 State Auditor's Report. I'm sorry, not 2020. This is dated 11/2019. This is an approximately 42-page document. This is the California Workers' Compensation Institute study. The title of it is Changes in the QME Population and Changes in the Medical Legal Trends in California Workers' Compensation. Shared with you some findings from that study. And then this is the Commission on Health and Safety and Workers' Compensation report dated 2017, and it's titled Qualified Medical Evaluators, Updating Trends in Evaluations, in Availability, and Trends in Equity. And for today's session, I want to pick apart the state auditor's report and share with you one of the findings of the state auditor. And I want to show you how this one singular finding creates for us as qualified medical evaluators who are interested in pursuing this type of work over the next several years, how this great opportunity is upon us now. And that if we can satisfy the Division of Workers' Compensation with our procedures and with our reports, we stand to benefit greatly by the flood of QME appointment requests that are expected to rain down upon the remaining qualified medical evaluators still in the system. Now, if you've been in this system for any length of time, you know that we've recently lost hundreds and hundreds of qualified medical evaluators, and there's a reason for this. There's a reason that hundreds of qualified medical evaluators have dropped out of the system, and I'm going to share with you what some of those reasons are, how you can avoid falling prey to some of those reasons yourself, and also how these reasons create for you a great and tremendous opportunity to receive an avalanche of cases calling your phone number in request for a qualified medical evaluation with you, if only you can satisfy the Division of Workers' Compensation and remain free and clear of the coming great scrutiny on the Qualified Medical Evaluation Report. Okay? So in today's session, let's go into the State Auditor's Report and talk about the coming changes that are going to be imposed upon us, and how these coming changes present for you a tremendous opportunity, and how you can effectively capitalize on that opportunity beginning right now. Okay? So let's begin with session 2 of today's program. Okay, so let's begin. And before we get into the State Auditor's Report itself, I want to share with you an idea that you may not have ever heard of, or if you have heard it, you may not have thought of it lately, or it may even come to you as a brand new concept. And this idea that I want to share with you has to do with what's known as advanced analytics. Advanced analytics. I want you to know that the Division of Workers' Compensation is implementing and developing and perfecting their advanced analytics system. And what advanced analytics is, it's an information sharing system that allows the Division of Workers' Compensation to share information with other governmental agencies. In other words, to be able to cooperatively intermix and intermingle and share information so as to analyze trends contained within their information. So, for example, the Division of Workers' Compensation, you may not know this, shares information with the Disability Evaluation Unit. And so the Division of Workers' Compensation knows a lot about you and a lot about your reports, at least through its sharing of information with this one other single governmental agency, the Disability Evaluation Unit. So this is not all, and this is not going to be the only governmental agency that the Division of Workers' Compensation shares information with. But the Division of Workers' Compensation up till now has been working on developing their algorithms to help them analyze both their own data and data from other organizations such as the Disability Evaluation Unit. So, for example, one of the things that we now know through the use of advanced analytics is we know that doctors who have received discipline by the Division of Workers' Compensation, by analyzing those doctors' reports and by sharing information with the Disability Evaluation Unit, we can analyze some trends and some common features that are found in doctors who have undergone discipline. It's known that doctors who have been disciplined by the Division of Workers' Compensation as a group and on average, tend to rate much, much more liberally than doctors who never, ever undergo discipline by the Division of Workers' Compensation. So it's known that these doctors that receive discipline by the DWC tend to rate permanent impairment higher than other doctors. They tend to use Alvarez-Guzman alternative impairment ratings more than other doctors. They tend to use apportionment less. In other words, they fail to apportion any portion of the permanent disability to other factors than other doctors. And I'm simply saying this not to discuss liberal versus conservative QMEs, but simply to enlighten you to the fact that the Division of Workers' Compensation is using advanced analytics, and they're developing and perfecting the types and sources and algorithms for in-depth analysis of this information as we speak. So the Division of Workers' Compensation already knows a lot about you, and in the future they're going to know much, much more about you, about your procedures, and about your QME reports. and it's coming. It's coming. The use of advanced analytics is coming. So the Division of Workers' Compensation will have a profile of you and your reporting and your rating, and they will know everything about you through the use of their advanced analytics. Now, this may come as a surprise to you, and this kind of came as a surprise to me as well when I learned this. And even before I learned about the use of advanced analytics, or the coming era of advanced analytics, I was once at a QME seminar where the QME educator, the speaker of the seminar, made a great revelation to me along these same lines, that other parties know about you, and other parties know what you're doing, and other parties know about the quality of the work product that you're putting forward. And this QME educator was talking about various QME procedures, and he said something very profound. He said, you know, we don't do this work in a vacuum. That was his quote. He said, we do not do this work in a vacuum. And he continued talking, and all of a sudden that hit me. His words hit me, and I raised my hand and I said, say that again. What did you mean? What did you mean by that? We don't do this work in a vacuum. And he says, well, you know, we examine the injured worker face to face, and we're alone. We sit at our computers and we work on our reports, and we're alone. And we think that we can do whatever we want and no one knows what we're doing because we're working in a vacuum all alone. And he said, but we don't. We don't do this work in a vacuum. And many times qualified medical evaluators, when they put forth their QME report, they think that nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows what's going through their mind. Nobody knows what their intent is. Nobody knows what their motive is. And it may seem that way to you when you're working in isolation. And let me tell you that when you prepare your qualified medical evaluation reports one by one, a month later, by one, 3 weeks later, by one, and you have this small population of QME reports that you do on an annual basis, you may think that you're fooling some parties with your language and with your procedures and with your commissions and your omissions, but you're not. Because once reports start being analyzed in volume through the use of advanced analytics and through full-time employees at the Division of Workers' Compensation who review reports in volume, once reports are reviewed in volume, very obvious problems in those reports show up very quickly. Whereas you think that you're very clever, when your reports are reviewed in volume along with other reports, it's very, very easy. You might not know this, but it's very, very easy to spot where you're complying with regulations and where you're not complying with regulations. And with the new coming changes being imposed by the state auditor, you're going to have to comply. You're going to have to finally get good at what it is that you're supposed to be doing. Otherwise, you'll be joining the population of QMEs who have dropped out of the system. And all of this is coming about very quickly due to the recent state auditor's finding, which was described in her report as issue number 3. Now, her contention is that the Division of Workers' Compensation has failed to ensure that QMEs produce high-quality reports, even though they're required to do so. Now, I have to agree with this. Now, those of you that know me know that I support the Division of Workers' Compensation, and I believe that the Division of Workers' Compensation is working for us as qualified medical evaluators in our best interest, and they're doing the best they can to protect the system. But I have to agree with the state auditor that they've not done as much as they could, should, or would to ensure that QMEs produce high-quality reports, even though they're required to do so. But let me tell you, now that the state auditor has exposed this weakness of the DWC, the DWC is now going to be compelled. In other words, they have to comply with this order. They're going to be compelled to increase their review of QME reports and increase their scrutiny on reports and increase their discipline for reports that fail to rise to the level of high quality reports. The department has not ensured that QMEs produce high quality reports that provide medical evidence to help judges and others resolve disputes timely. It has not tracked when judges rejected reports that failed to meet standards such as accuracy or completeness. And I agree with this. For whatever reason, if they're overwhelmed at the DWC, if they're understaffed at the DWC, they've done a poor job up till now in ensuring that QMEs produce high quality reports, but those days are now coming to an end and they're going to ramp up. Okay? So what's the big deal? What's the big deal about whether or not QMEs reports are good or not, right? Why should we care as QMEs whether the parties can resolve the issues? What do we care, right? Well, the problem with that is when QMEs fail to produce high quality reports, it delays the resolution of disputes. It possibly delays the worker's receipt of benefits, which we don't want. Nobody wants that. And delays can increase costs for employers that are involved in the disputes. And this is oh so true. This is oh so true. And let me give you just a couple of examples. You may be able to relate to this yourself. If you're a qualified medical evaluator and you are working on an evaluation and you're working on a report and you stumble across an issue that causes you to have to confront a weakness that you may have, a weakness in your report writing, a weakness in your physical exam, a weakness in your providing for an AOE COE determination, a weakness in providing for an apportionment determination, a weakness in resolving a dispute, a weakness in obtaining range of motion measurements, a weakness in being able to order necessary diagnostic studies. Any weakness, fill in the blank. You have weaknesses. We all have weaknesses. Well, when qualified medical evaluators stumble upon a weakness or they stumble upon their weakness, qualified medical evaluators handle these stumbling blocks, handle these confrontations in typical fashion across the board of qualified medical evaluators. The first way that qualified medical evaluators fail to confront their weaknesses is by delaying the production of their report. And a qualified medical evaluator who knows he's upon a stumbling block in his own skill and talent as a qualified medical evaluator will push the report aside on his desk until the 29th day because he fails to be able to confront the issue wherein his weakness lies. And then on the 29th day, he'll pump out the report and he'll use phrases such as, "No x-rays were provided for my review," okay, in order to explain why he himself did not order x-rays. Say, "No x-rays were provided for my review." In other words, he's not responsible for ordering the diagnostic studies. And he'll fail to address whatever his particular weakness is through omission in the report. Through omission in the report. It's supposed to be in the report, but there's something missing in the report through an omission. And then this omission, through waiting for 29 days before failing to address the weakness, and then omitting a resolution of the disputed issue in the report, causing the need for a reevaluation, causing the need for a supplemental report, or perhaps many times qualified medical evaluators, because they're unable to resolve the dispute due to their own weakness, will declare the examinee to be not permanent and stationary. Does that sound familiar? Qualified medical evaluator simply thinks to himself, well, I'll address it in 12 months when they come back to me, and then they'll be permanent and stationary at the time. And these delays in resolving disputed issues are just increasing costs prohibitively across the board, and the Division of Workers' Compensation is now being required. They've got the gun to their own head through the state auditor. They're being required to demand that qualified medical evaluators actually address disputed issues. So let's talk a little bit about what the law has to say about resolving disputed issues. Okay, so let's talk about the issue of resolving disputed issues. And let me just say that your ability to retain your QME credential during your current 2-year appointment period, as well as your ability to be reappointed as a qualified medical evaluator, is going to, more than anything else, is going to hinge on your ability to resolve disputed issues. Your ability to resolve disputed issues. No longer is it going to be permissible for you to sidestep and skirt the disputed issues due to your own weaknesses in particular areas of your evaluating and your reporting. So what I want to share with you now has to do with what the Division of Workers' Compensation is doing and how they're organizing and orchestrating their upcoming approach to reviewing more and more qualified medical evaluators reports. And what the Division of Workers' Compensation is doing is they're establishing a new level of communication with the workers' compensation judges, who are the first line of reviewers for your reports. So imagine that your report arrives in front of the workers' compensation judge, and the parties are there hopefully to resolve for once and for all the disputed issues in the case. And the judge opens up your report and stumbles upon the typical QME report that is full of gibberish and does not resolve disputed issues. It's full of typos and syntax errors. It's not formatted properly. It's created on some sort of template from the doctor's clinical practice, perhaps something that he uses related to his personal injury practice, and the report is a disaster. Well, the judges are going to have new incentive and new encouragement and new directive to report these deficient and low quality reports to the Division of Workers' Compensation at the medical unit. And the Division of Workers' Compensation is working on building their procedure for this very purpose. And what they're doing, and I have here a copy of probably the first generation documentation that is being designed by the Division of Workers' Compensation for the judges to use in reporting deficient and low quality reports. And as a basic template here, being designed by the Division of Workers' Compensation, the Division of Workers' Compensation is going to provide the judges an easy opportunity to describe deficiencies in your reports through the use of this form. And they specifically cite several labor codes and codes of regulation that the judges can refer to in pointing out deficiencies in qualified medical evaluators reports. So the first opportunity that the judges will have to point out deficiencies have to do with Labor Code 139.2, where the report fails to meet minimum standards. And you should go ahead and look up this labor code. The second opportunity is that the Qualified Medical Evaluators report does not meet the minimum standards mandated by CCR 10606, which describes what elements should be contained in the Qualified Medical Evaluators reports in order to qualify as medical evidence. So there's a section here where the judges can explain to the parties where your report fails to meet the requirements in section 10606. And I won't talk much about that either. And then finally, on the second page, is an opportunity for the judges to point out deficiencies in the report according to California Code of Regulation 9793, Section H, Section 3. So let's talk about Section H, Section 3 of California Code of Regulation 9793. Okay, so let's read from CCR 9793, Section H, subparagraph 3. And this has to do with the ability of your report to resolve disputed issues. Resolve disputed issues. Many qualified medical evaluators' reports fail to resolve disputed issues and cause unnecessary delays and unnecessary increased costs in the resolution of these claims. So I want to share with you what CCR 9793 has to say about resolving disputed claims, and we're going to use that as a springboard into another California Code of Regulation that requires us to address all contested medical issues. And I'm going to read that section for you, and then I'm going to show you exactly how to do this in the substance and the body of your QME report. Okay, so first things first, let's read from 9793. And Section H of CCR 9793 has to do with what constitutes a medical legal expense. Okay, so the reports that we're submitting for payment are medical legal expenses. Okay, our QME reports are medical legal expenses. But the obligation to pay those medical legal expenses is hinged on a couple of things. And with regards to the Qualified Medical Evaluator's report, the veracity and validity of the medical legal expense associated with our reports is based on the capacity or the ability of the report to actually resolve disputed issues. Okay? In other words, meaning that the payers of our medical legal expenses have no obligation to pay for our reports when those reports don't actually resolve the disputed medical issue. Okay, so this is CCR 9793. So I have for you Section H right here, and I'm reading from that right here. It says that the cost of medical evaluations, diagnostic tests, and interpreters is not a medical legal expense unless all of the following conditions exist. And here's the one that relates to us with our qualified medical reports, and this is section number 3 right here on the bottom. It says the report is capable of proving or disproving a disputed medical fact essential to the resolution of a contested claim, considering the substance as well as the form of the report, as required by applicable statutes, regulations, and case law. Now, the Division of Workers' Compensation has provided a slight adaptation to this in their document being provided to the judges, and they've amended that to say that pursuant to 9793, Section H, subsection 3, in considering the substance as well as the form of the report as required by applicable statutes, regulations, and case law, and that's the same language that we just reviewed, the report is not capable of proving or disproving a disputed medical fact because the report does not constitute substantial medical evidence. The report fails to constitute substantial medical evidence because, and then the judge will fill in the blank and explain all the reasons why the report does not constitute substantial medical evidence. So what does this mean? This means from here on out, your reports have to get much, much better. Each opinion and conclusion that you offer in the body of your report must now, more than ever, qualify as substantial medical evidence, and this is not always easy to do. It is possible to do it, but it requires complex medical decision making, and it requires that you bear down and exert some mental effort and some concentration and some focus on your reports. Otherwise, these reports are going to be rejected by the workers' compensation judge, and they'll be reported to the Division of Workers' Compensation. So let's talk about actually resolving disputed issues and actually answering the questions that are raised by the parties in our Qualified Medical Evaluators reports. And in order to understand the law behind that, let's review CCR 35.5, which tells us that the evaluator shall address all contested medical issues. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So here I have CCR 35.5. Hope you can see that. This is called Compliance by the QME with the Administrative Director's Evaluation and Reporting Guidelines. So let's go to 35.5C1, and this is where it all boils down to. Okay, in the beginning of today's program, I mentioned to you that I was going to give you a couple of suggestions that if you will just implement them, it will change your QME practice forever, and here is number one of them. So I'm going to share this with you, and then I'm going to give you another tip as to how to incorporate this in the body of your report, and these two suggestions alone will dramatically change your reporting for the better forever. Okay? So it says here, the evaluator shall address all contested medical issues arising from all injuries reported on one or more claim forms prior to the date of the employee's appointment with the Qualified Medical Evaluator, provided that those are issues within the evaluator's scope of practice and areas of clinical competence. Period. Here it is. The reporting evaluator shall attempt to address each question raised by each party in the issue cover letter that's sent to the evaluator as provided in subdivision such and such and such and such. Let me reread that last sentence. It says the reporting evaluator shall attempt to address each question raised by each party in the issue cover letters. Okay? Now I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story about questions raised by the parties and cover letters. I was recently at a QME Continuing Education seminar, and at this seminar they had a unique format for the presentation. They had a panel of experts up at the front of the room, and the panel of experts, which included claims administrators, workers' compensation judges, applicant attorneys, defense attorneys, continuing education providers, and what have you. They were talking about how we, as qualified medical evaluators in the audience, could improve the usefulness of our reports for the parties. So how can we, as qualified medical evaluators, improve our reports so that the claims administrators can use our reports? How can we improve our reports so the judges can better use our reports? And each person on the panel provided some suggestions as to how we as qualified medical evaluators could improve the usefulness of our reports. Okay, so can you imagine the scene? Well, each panel member offered their suggestions, and it came to the defense attorney on the panel. And the defense attorney suggested to the audience that if we could please address the questions that are posed in the cover letters, he would greatly appreciate the qualified medical evaluator, and the report would be infinitely more valuable to him and his company if we could just please address the questions that are posed in the cover letter. And of course, the qualified medical evaluators like myself in the audience mold this over in our minds. And the bold qualified medical evaluators raised their hands with some questions. And one qualified medical evaluator raised his hand and he said, well, you just don't understand, Mr. Defense Attorney. You don't understand. We get these cover letters and they're templated and they're boilerplated and they're not customized to the examinee. And it seems that the cover letter is the same cover letter we get over and over and over again. And to us, it just seems like boilerplated, templated, canned cover letters. Can you relate to that? You can relate to that, correct? I can relate to that. That sounds like a lot of the cover letters that I get. At which point the defense attorney put his head in his hands. He shook his head. He looked up with an exasperated look on his face, and he said, the cover letter that you get is the cover letter that you get. Would you please address the questions in the cover letter that you get? And the principle is that by law, we're required to address each question that's posed in the issue cover letters that is sent to the evaluator prior to the appointment. Now, how many times do you make an effort to address each and every question that's posed in the cover letters? Probably never. Probably never. Because you're doing your own thing, you're doing your own procedure, you're waiting until the 29th day, you're failing to address the difficult issues like AOE, COE, and alternative impairments under Alvarez-Guzman, and apportionment of the permanent impairment and work restrictions, and all these difficult decisions that require complex medical decision making. You're simply deferring that out of your own weaknesses and your own search for ease and comfort, and I understand that. But it's no longer going to fly with the Division of Workers' Compensation. And it actually makes a lot of sense. The upset by the parties makes a lot of sense. Imagine if you had a 12-year-old child and you asked him a question. Imagine if you asked him, Jimmy, did you pass your science test? And Jimmy says, Dad, I ate my yogurt. And you go, Jimmy, did you pass your science test? And Jimmy says, I delivered my papers, Dad. Go, Jimmy, did you pass the science test? And Jimmy says, I mowed the back lawn, Dad. And he fails to answer your question over and over and over again. What would you do? You'd grab him by the neck and say, Jimmy, did you pass the science test? And that's the way the parties feel with our qualified medical evaluators' reports. And so from here on out, the single greatest suggestion I can offer to you in terms of being able to capture the new opportunity that's being presented to us by the Division of Workers' Compensation is to strive to improve your reports so that they better serve the parties who are the readers of your reports. Now, many qualified medical evaluators are not going to be able to do this. They're not going to be able to qualify their opinions and conclusions as substantial medical evidence, and the reports are going to be winding up on this form filled out by the judges because it fails to qualify as substantial medical evidence. Many qualified medical evaluators are not going to be able to do this, and they're going to drop out of the system. And this is going to create a flood of new opportunities for you to obtain these additional evaluations. Many qualified medical evaluators are not going to be able to comply with CCR 9793 in terms of resolving disputed issues. Many are not going to be able to qualify with CCR 10606, and the reports are not going to meet minimum standards. Many are not going to be able to qualify with Labor Code 139.2, and you are going to receive the glut and the flood and the avalanche of these evaluations as more and more qualified medical evaluators drop off the system. So let me explain to you exactly how, in the body of your report, to resolve the disputed issues and to answer each of the questions that are posed by the parties. Okay, so let's finish up today's discussion with exactly how to accomplish this in the body of your report. And at the beginning of this discussion, I promised you that I would give you 2 suggestions. And the first suggestion, let me just reiterate, is to address each question raised by each party in the issue cover letters that you get. And here is the $1 million suggestion, and this is how to actually put that into practice. Now, going forward with each of your QME reports, I want you to take a look at the cover letters that you get, whether it be from an unrepresented injured worker where the cover letter simply comes from the claims administrator, or in the cases of a represented injured worker where you may get either 2 separate cover letters, one from the applicant attorney, one from the defense attorney, or in some cases when you get a single combined letter that's agreed upon by both the applicant and the defense attorney. Your approach is going to be the same, with the exception that with a represented injured worker, in those cases where you get dual cover letters from both parties, you're going to have twice as many questions to have to answer because you have 2 cover letters. But many times those questions that are asked by the parties in the cover letters, in the case of 2 cover letters, many times those questions overlap and are sometimes the same question. So these questions that you receive from the parties should be handled in the appropriate sections of your report that coincide with the type of question that's being asked by one or the other of the parties. So let me give you an example. I have a cover letter here, and I'm not going to show it to you because it's not redacted, but this is a cover letter that has some typical questions raised by the parties for us as qualified medical evaluators. And so, for example, in this cover letter, it says, this is the way many cover letters go, it says, "We would appreciate your usual, thorough, and complete evaluation of this individual and your response to the following questions, colon." And then there's a list of questions. Now imagine if you asked your 12-year-old son a series of questions and you never got those questions answered. That is the experience of the claims administrators and the applicant attorneys and the defense attorneys. They don't get their questions answered, and the new era qualified medical evaluator can succeed greatly, greatly beyond your wildest dreams if you simply adopt this as your new operating principle moving forward. The first question here says, is there existence of a work-related mechanism and work-related diagnosis which could substantiate existence of an accepted workers' compensation claim to any body part other than the cervical and thoracic spine ? If so, please explain. Period. What incident caused injury? Now, when considering this question, what is the nature of this question? This question is a causation question, correct? She's asking about what incident caused an injury. She's asking what is the mechanism of injury that could possibly cause this injury that's being claimed by the examinee. This is a causation question. So this question should be answered in the causation section of your report. And here's how you do it. In your report, in the causation section, you'll have your topic heading, which says causation in bold, right? And then immediately below the causation heading, you're going to say the following. And this is going to be the same for each question that you answer. You're going to say the blank date cover letter. Let's say the November 1st, 2019 cover letter from Betty Sue of ABC Insurance Company requests, colon, drop down new line, bullet point, and after the bullet point, you insert the entirety of this question into the body of your report. You'll simply type it out. Is there an existence of a work-related mechanism? And on and on and on until the entirety of the question is input into the body of your report. The November 1st cover letter from Becky Sue requests, and then you put the question, right, from the cover letter. And then you drop down below the cover letter, you drop down below the question, a couple lines, and you answer the question or questions. And it goes like this: answer, colon, and therein you provide the answers to the questions. You don't provide gibberish language that you want to provide. You don't want to provide language that you're comfortable with, that flows off of your tongue easily or off of your fingertips easily. You want to answer the questions that the parties ask of you. Just like when you ask your 12-year-old son, did you pass the science test? You don't want him to respond with what flavor is his favorite ice cream. Does that make sense? And you handle the causation question. Now, if you have two cover letters from two parties, you would handle the first party's question, typically the party that sent you the cover letter first. The party that has the earliest dated cover letter would get the first response, and then the party that sent you the later dated cover letter would get the next response, and you would answer both parties' questions in the causation section of your report. Our next question says, what is Miss Smith's industrial diagnosis as it relates to her claimed industrial injury dated such and such? And this would go into also in the causation section of your report. This is a causation question, and she says, what is the specific mechanism of injury which caused this? And you would answer the question. Next question. When do you believe the examinee or the applicant reached a permanent and stationary status? This would go in the permanent and stationary section of your report, and you would drop down below the topic heading, and again you would say the November 1st, 2019 cover letter from Becky Sue of ABC Insurance Company requests, colon, drop down, bullet. When do you believe she reached a permanent and stationary status? Drop down a couple lines and say answer, colon. In my opinion and within reasonable medical probability, Mrs. Jones achieved a permanent and stationary status on August 1st, 2019, period. Reasons for this conclusion include, colon, drop down, number one, and input reason number one why you believe first that the examinee is permanent and stationary, and number two, why you believe August 1st, 2019 to be the permanent and stationary date. And in this way, you answer the question, and you answer the question in a way where your answer qualifies as substantial medical evidence that can actually resolve the dispute over the examinee's permanent and stationary date. So each question must be answered, first of all, and it must be answered in a manner that qualifies as substantial medical evidence, and this is exactly how you do it. With regards to the next question, what is the permanent disability rating per the AMA Guides 5th edition? The November 1st, 2019 cover letter from Becky Sue of ABC Insurance Company requests, drop down, bullet point, quote, what is the permanent disability rating per the AMA Guides 5th edition? Unquote, drop down, answer, colon. In my opinion and within reasonable medical probability, Mrs. Jones qualifies for permanent impairment of the lumbar spine according to the DRE Category 3, period. This contemplates that she has on and on radiculopathy and loss of relevant reflexes and this and that according to table 15-whatever it is, and you answer the question and you explain in how and why reasoning as to why you arrived at this particular answer so that the opinion and conclusion qualifies as substantial medical evidence. The November 1st, 2019 cover letter from Becky Sue of ABC Insurance Company requests, please address apportionment to prior disability, comma, as well as apportionment to causation, period, unquote. Drop down, answer, colon. In my opinion, 40% of the permanent impairment of DRE Category 3 at 15% whole person impairment is due to the industrial injury, and 60% is due to other factors, period. Reasons for this conclusion include, colon, drop down, reason number 1, reason number 2, reason number 3, and you explain to the parties your reasons in order to qualify your answer to the question as substantial medical evidence. And doctors, if you can do this for each and every one of your reports are going to rise like cream to the top of a cup of milk. And your reports will stand out head and shoulders from the other reports that are being scrutinized by the workers' compensation judges and coming into the front of the Division of Workers' Compensation, wherein your credential as a qualified medical evaluator during your current term and certainly for your reappointment term is going to be challenged. And that's the last thing you want. What you want is you want to be able to reap the harvest of new cases that are going to be flooded upon you as more and more qualified medical evaluators simply realize that this is just too much work and it's just too difficult to do, and it's not worth the time and mental energy investment for the reimbursement received. But in my opinion, the exact opposite is the actual case. And if you can simply bear down and learn to adopt this procedure in your upcoming cases, you stand to benefit greatly by the upcoming changes promulgated by the Division of Workers' Compensation. And you'll be like me with the belief that all changes promulgated by the Division of Workers' Compensation have as their singular purpose to improve conditions, including improve conditions for all parties and all players, including qualified medical evaluators in the system. And that's been my experience with the Division of Workers' Compensation, and I believe that's what you will experience as well if you'll simply adopt these two simple procedures that I shared with you today. So doctors, I hope this helps you. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me on today's discussion. I look forward to being with you on future discussions as well. And for now, I'm wishing you best of success in your career as a qualified medical evaluator.